Hello बच्चों, please read this question. In the following table, which of the options are correct? Option E. When delta H is negative and delta S is positive, reaction is spontaneous at all temperature. Option B. Delta H is positive, delta S is negative, non-spontaneous regardless of temperature. Option C. When delta H is positive and delta S is positive, the reaction is spontaneous only at high temperature. And option D. When delta H is negative and delta S is negative, the reaction is spontaneous only at low temperature. So please note that key concept of this question is spontaneity of reaction is given by delta G equal to delta H minus T delta S. When delta G is less than 0, reaction is spontaneous. Now when delta H is less than 0 and delta S is greater than 0, then reaction is spontaneous at all temperature. Spontaneous at all temperature. Because delta G equal to delta H minus T delta S, when delta S is less than 0, so delta H is negative and T positive, delta S is positive. This means this whole term is positive. So equal to minus negative and negative, which is negative. That is less than 0. So delta G is less than 0. So reaction is spontaneous at all temperature. And the second option is delta H is greater than 0 and is less than 0. Then delta G is equal to delta H minus T delta S. Delta H is positive minus T positive and delta S is negative. This means positive plus positive, which is equal to positive. This means delta G is greater than 0. So reaction is non-spontaneous regardless of temperature. Option C is delta H is positive and delta S is positive. So delta G equal to delta H minus T delta S. This means positive minus T, which is positive, and delta S is positive. This means positive minus positive. If this term is greater than delta H, then only delta G is less than 0. This means reaction is spontaneous only at high temperature. Reaction is spontaneous only at high temperature. And the fourth option is delta H is less than 0 and delta H is less than 0, delta S is less than 0. This means delta G equal to delta H minus T delta S. Delta H is negative quantity and delta S is also negative quantity. This means which is equal to negative quantity plus positive quantity. If negative quantity is greater than positive quantity, then only delta G is less than 0. This means delta G is less than 0 only at low temperature. So reaction is spontaneous. Only at low temperature. Low temperature. Let's check the option. So option A is when delta H is negative and delta S is positive, reaction is spontaneous at all temperature, which is correct. Option B, when delta H is positive and delta S is negative, reaction is non-spontaneous regardless of temperature, which is also correct. Option C is when delta H is positive and delta S is positive, the reaction is spontaneous only at high temperature, which is also correct. And option D is when delta H is negative and delta S is negative, the reaction is spontaneous only at low temperature, which is also correct. This means all the four options A, B, C and D are correct. So option A, B, C and D are correct. Hope you all understand it well. Thank you.